Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our October 6th Words Across the Water event. This is the second Words Across the Water event of this semester. There are two more. The next one is October 27th. I haven't put out the link to that one yet, but I will probably tomorrow. And then the last one is in November. I think the date of that is November 14th. But the next one is October 26th, no, 27th. It's a Thursday. We have a great program tonight. One of my all-time favorite students from South Carolina State University has agreed to join us on Zoom to be the moderator. Hanna Hoilett-Frierson was not only the captain of her soccer team, by the way, which she was honor student, poet laureate of South Carolina State University, and somewhere I have a picture of her standing next to Nikki Giovanni. And she has since gone on to become a professor, a doctor, assistant principal. And so she is a woman of great achievement. I have followed her on Facebook and through emails over the years. I have an entire email folder devoted to Hanna Hoilett. And not least, over the summer, she published her first book of poetry. And so I'm hopeful that maybe towards the end of the evening, she will be willing to grace us with one of her poems. I see some of her other former professors, have joined us tonight, as well as possibly some people who knew her as a student. I will allow her to introduce our star poets. I do just want to say that I encountered Cyndi Marshall through a video. A friend emailed me, Dr. Allison McCletchy, who I'm afraid can't be here this evening, and said, "You have to watch this." And then 5 minutes later, emailed me another one. "You have to watch this too." And and immediately I was taken.
Okay, I'm on a Zoom right now. Can I call you back?
I have to ask somebody to mute themselves. Jillian Hanesworth, I heard interviewed on National Public Radio. And that was a very emotional experience in the aftermath of a horrible event there. Up in Buffalo. And at that point, I immediately wanted to reach out to her. How do you find words after such an event? Words Across the Water was co-founded by Dr. Allison McCletchy, also a former student, Dr. Frank Martin, and myself. I was by far the junior partner. It followed up on a series of events we'd done in honor of 350 years of African-American poetry. We turned to Zoom out of desperation because we couldn't invite people here, and it has turned out to be an enormous blessing. We've been able to build a kind of virtual community of people who come together and discuss some of the most important things. The theme for tonight is Indigenous and Migrant. And I came to that theme. Indigenous and Migrant, when I looked at the date that I'd set it up and saw, okay, that's right before Indigenous Peoples Day, which South Carolina still calls Columbus Day. And as we know, October 1492 started a horrible period for the indigenous peoples of this continent. And it seems to me that creativity is one of the ultimate expressions of survival. You might see in front of you this poem I've put on the screen. It's by another poet who hails from Barbados and also claims Jamaica. He died 2 years ago, Kamal Brathwaite. The Nobel Prize were announced today, and for the last 30 years of Brathwaite's life, one of the annual disappointments was that he never received the Nobel Prize. He did receive prizes that are in some ways more significant, but I thought he deserved the Nobel Prize. This poem is his poem about the Colombian encounter, and it's sort of my inspiration for using this theme. Somebody needs to be admitted here. So I'm just going to read the last stanza. The poem is called Colombe. And if you have heard Kamal Brathwaite's voice, forgive me for sounding nothing like him. If you haven't heard his voice, I encourage you to seek it out. There are plenty of videos of him reading. Columbus from his afterdeck saw beaded fig trees, yellow puis, blazed like pollen and thin waterfalls suspended in the green as his eyes climbed towards the highest ridges, where our farms were hidden. Now he was sure. He heard soft voices mocking in the leaves. What did this journey need? This new world mean? Discovery or a return to terrors he had sailed from, known before? I watched him pause. Then he was flashing silence. Crabs snapped their claws and scattered as he walked towards our shore. And I love that ending, the image of crabs snapping their claws as he leaves, that is to say, Columbus leaves to unveil a great torrent of violence. As I said, though, this is a celebration. To celebrate creativity is one of the ultimate celebrations of survival in the faces of the colonialist forces that Columbus represented. So I want to thank our panel, Dr. Hoilett-Frierson, Jillian Hanesworth, and Cyndi Marshall. And with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Hoilett-Frierson.
Good evening, everyone. It is definitely my pleasure to be a part of this wonderful event. I did not hesitate when asked to moderate. In my preparation, of course, I've taken some time to look at works of Cyndi and Jillian, and I'm excited. They're wonderful poets. So I'm not gonna prolong that part. Dr. Cassidy, thank you for that wonderful introduction. Seems so long ago, about 20 years. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Cyndi, and then later on I'll introduce Jillian. Cyndi Marshall is a spoken word poet, storyteller, and creative entrepreneur based in the beautiful island of Barbados. Cyndi, I am actually from Jamaica, so we're neighbors. An arts activist and language advocate, Marshall uses performance, poetry, and literature to encourage social discourse on issues of identity. A multiple award-winning poet, Marshall produces work that educates and entertains audiences, encouraging introspection and progressive thought. Published in the Caribbean Writer Literary Journal and fresh off an appearance at the 2021 Women of the World Poetry Slam, we're delighted to welcome Cyndi Marshall to today's session of Words Across the Water.
Hey, good evening, everybody. I'm going to ask right quick. Can everybody hear me well? You can thumbs up if anything. Awesome. So this is such a wonderful opportunity to be able to share my work with you, and I'm so glad that Tom reached out to me and to be here with you and to be able to share my work. So I'm not gonna delay any longer. This first piece that I'm gonna share with you, I wanted really to stick to the theme and to show how I interpret the theme and how I've interacted with the theme in my work. So this first piece is called Us and Them, and I call it a poetic triptych only because I don't have another name for the form of the poem, but it's a poetic triptych called Us and Them. 1. They poisoned our water with their promises, fertilized our soil with false hope and manufactured belief, ground our bones for their stone and mortar edifices, made us into ash in a language they could recognize, fashioned entire cities out of our flesh and blood and brethren, all to shut us out of ourselves. 2. They have made the enemy look just like us and made us both friend and foe, so much like them that we no longer believe that we can trust our own eyes or our voices. 3. They have performed history's greatest magic trick, Houdini'd our memoirs, misdirected our memories, rewritten our reality, sawed our sense of self into pieces, and we, a docile audience, have seen the show enough to become magicians for ourselves. And that's the first piece. And I think it does kind of speak to the erasure of the Indigenous experience, given that, you know, as Tom said, you guys still call Indigenous Peoples Day Columbus Day. So this experience of having been silenced, of having been submerged, as Kama would say, rather than having our experiences represented. So the next piece is one that is very near and dear to me, because again, as my bio said, I'm a language advocate. I am very passionate about making sure that the language varieties, the dialects of the Caribbean that are often considered substandard to English, are given their rightful respect. They are the way that we express ourselves and the way that we talk about our experience as descendants of enslaved peoples. So this piece is called Not My Mother. English, you are not my mother. I do not remember suckling at your breast as a youngster. I do not remember you holding me in your arms with any measure of comfort for me. I do not feel familiarity when you fall from my lips, but still you permeate my memories. They say the apple doesn't fall far from the tree, but I have never been a fan of cliches, so I wonder how much you consider me family. I do not feel like the child that you asked for. I am not the one you wanted, but I guess you took what you could get while I took what I was fed forcefully. You imposed your lexicon on me in place of the languages from the birthland of my ancestry. I have lost so much to you. And is that how a good mother treats her child? Using him to live through vicariously so the shackles live on in his mentality. English, you are not my mother. You never wanted me tainting your bloodlines with my clicks and rhythms, so you made me remember you while they were erased from my system. I am not pure enough for you, am I? Will I ever be? I cannot fathom that it is possible when at every corner a part of my true roots still bear fruit in my speech, when my words still dance like a rebellion on my tongue in accents reminiscent of my ancestors' songs. Have you forgotten your own song, mother? What identity are you singing in? Thank you. And that piece was to deal with the dissonance I felt because Barbados was uninterruptedly colonized by the British. And because of our geography and the geopolitics of the space of Barbados, when emancipation came about, the newly freed people didn't have anywhere to go. We didn't have like forest land. We just had plantations like everywhere. So we were very, very thoroughly, so to speak, colonized. And when Kamal Brathwaite writes about this in his work, he talks about the ways in which African people submerged our experience in order for our traditions and our culture to live on. And so Barbados does not have a Creole because of the uninterrupted contact with the British and only the British. We have a dialect of English. So ultimately we still sound like we speak English. And also because of that, because it doesn't sound like the Queen, or I suppose the King's now English, it's always been, you need to speak proper English. You need to speak properly when we speak in our native dialect. And it caused a lot of dissonance for me because I was looking at other places in the Caribbean. I did linguistics as an undergrad. And I was looking at other places in the Caribbean, and a lot of other places in the Caribbean have Creoles that sound completely different from like standard English, so to speak. And whenever I travel and I perform or I do residencies with people from other countries, they say, what language do you speak in Barbados? And I always have the dissonance of having to say, well, technically we speak English, but our native language is not English. That's not our native language. Our native language is Bajan. And that's the experience and the background that piece came out of. So the next piece I'm gonna do is one that is a little bit more appreciative, well, rather more appreciative of what Bajan sounds like, and it's called Tuk Tok. I dance to the Tuk band of my native tongue, and you tell me to talk properly. You ensnare me in snares that not only how to beat my identity out of me, but I dance to the Tuk band of my native tongue, even when you call me inappropriate, misplacing my bass to replace it with tastes of debasement for my mouth to savor. I dance to the Tuk band of my native tongue, and you say I sound uneducated, wiping my culture clean as a penny whistle with its high pitches recalibrated and ideals dismantled. But I dance to the Tuk band of my native tongue, even when you criticize my rhythm for not wanting to conform or stay still so I would forget the songs of my people. I dance to the Tuk band of my native tongue, and you tell me to quit the ruckus, as if Ruckatuk is empty raucousness that does not know when to pipe down. I dance to the Tuk band of my native tongue, and you tell me to stop. Stop being who I am. Stop speaking like the people I come from. Stop calling attention to my Blackness, to my Bajanness. Stop and be more palatable to my oppressors. I hear the Tuk band of my native tongue, and I wish that you hadn't stopped dancing. Thank you. The next piece I'm going to perform is the piece that was featured in the Caribbean Writer Literary Journal. And it's a conversation, I think, that comes up a lot for descendants of enslaved peoples, which focuses around like issues of identity. How exactly do we connect with who we are and the nuances of each part of our identity, especially when we have so little access to them. So this piece is called Blind Date. My Black and my Caribbean walk into a room and the air is still, like after the punchline of a stale joke. My Black speaks first, and says, "What's up? Where you from, fam?" Roots itself in the now, where the place it calls home is a loan that it refuses to pay back. My Caribbean says, "I am the smallest part of everywhere," scatters its spores across fields of time, reaches places stranger to a tainted touch, thrives in places it has been told it shouldn't, but can't see past its next breath. "Where are you from?" my Caribbean says. And my Black replies, "Everywhere and nowhere," becomes an echo of a self lost in translation between past, present, and the hope of a future. My Black and my Caribbean walk into a breadfruit roast, and one marvels at the way the skin of the breadfruit darkens in the embers without ever daring to become a part of the flames. The other wonders when the ugly parts of itself became a luxury, turned commodity to the same ones who spurned it. My Caribbean says, "Look at the way I have learned to believe in the castle of my skin." My Black replies, "And the way that they have taken that too." My Black and my Caribbean walk into a church, and one kneels at the altar with teary eye and sammed tongue and faith engineered unshakable. The other is a doubting Thomas asking far too many questions. My Black and my Caribbean walk into a carnival, and one puts itself on parade. The other is looking for the playhouse of mirrors designed to warp its self-image beyond recognition. My Caribbean says, "Come, let us cut loose and forget ourselves," surrendering to the world with carefree abandon. My Black whispers to itself, "It seems as though we already have." My Black and my Caribbean walk into a room, and already one of them is brooding over the likelihood that this relationship will ever work out. Thank you. I'm not sure how I'm doing on time because I actually didn't time this. I was going very much with the feeling that was on my heart today. But I do have one more piece to share, if that's okay with the moderators.
That is okay. That is okay.
Awesome. So this last piece that I want to share is actually on an audio project that I've done called Syndicated, that is available on all music streaming online platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, all that fun stuff. But this was written from a very unrelated experience where I went into the bus terminal in town, and there was a man selling snow cones. It was a snow cone vendor. And the way that he prepared the snow cone so lovingly made me have this interesting reflection again about language, because I tie just about everything back to language, given that language is the way we express ourselves. Language speaks us as much as we speak language. So this last piece is called My Native Language, because after having the whole conversation of English not being my native language, I also thought about the ways in which we are not taught, or we are not, historically, we have been untaught, rather, the instinct of being proud of who we are and where we come from, of loving ourselves. So this piece is called My Native Language. Pride is not my native language. For far too long, subservience has been made to be the saliva of my people, inundating our mouths with submission to unteach us of the rebel blood running through our veins. Pride is not my native language. They tied our tongues when they shackled us, chained our Manipura chakras, and infiltrated the links in our DNA with a super strain of yes massa bacteria. Pride is not my native language. It becomes so easily stuck in our throats, like the songs we do not know or remember, like the fevered pulse of Igbo, Koromanti, and Ashantiwa, Like the ashes, they have raised to ashes that can only rise again as phoenix in hushed tones. Pride is not my native language. It has been systematically erased and replaced with words that match the color of a public face and align with the facades of a freedom that we fake rather than feel. Pride is not my native language. It was silenced in slave raids and middle passage suicides, sold dirt cheap and beaten to its knees, subhumanized into endangerment and whipped to death. Pride is not my native language. We do not know what it is to be content with who we are, only to be satisfied with the image of ourselves we have been taught and shown long enough to believe that it is truth. Pride is not my native language. But curricula attempt haphazardly to reinstill the mores of a pride they cannot describe accurately before our indoctrination into self-loathing is too far gone for it to matter to most. Pride is not my native language. It has been noticeably lacking in the vernacular of my people. It lives on only incognito in the sing-song tuck rhythm iams of our accents. Pride is not my native language. It exists in quantities large enough to placate the people, to coerce us away from rebellion and coax us away from riot, but not so large as to cease archaic thought and abolish mental slavery entirely. Pride is not my native language. Pride is not my native language. Pride was not our native language. But we riot and we fight and we protest and we write. So I know that it is not extinct. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Thank you. I see snaps, Cyndi. Can you see? That was lovely. I love those pieces. Later, I definitely have some questions and something that I can definitely, I put it in the comments, definitely relate to that language thing. Of course, you know, Jamaica speaks Patois. And you said something that I wondered, and I've been to Trinidad and I wondered about this because as a child, you know, we're constantly corrected, speak English, speak properly. And I found that so interesting because having gone to school in Jamaica my whole life, graduated from high school there, and then, you know, I had the opportunity to come to the US to study. And of course, everybody wants to go. Well, not everybody. Can you say something in Jamaican? And I'm like, what? You know, we
I actually have a piece dedicated to that very same experience. That very same. I could share it if you would like, if people want to hear it.
I want to hear it, but I think we can fit in one more. So if you wanted to share that one, that would be great.
Sure. It's rather short. It's about 2 minutes. It's called an ode to the idiot who asks me to say something in Beijing.
Okay, nice. Yes, lovely. Let's go.
Give me a second to respond. Matter of fact, give me 5. It's been a millennium since I've known what my native tongue sounds like. How am I supposed to speak a language that was stolen from me? Or you really just want me to pick my teeth so you could hear how much, even after all this time, I still don't sound enough like you? Or Google Translate is not going to help you here. When you try to replicate a Caribbean accent and think that this Bajan girl sounds anything like that Jamaican appropriation you have running rampant in Hollywood, it reminds me how often you look at me, at my country, and see commodity. How often you look at me and think you can make souvenirs out of my tongue. 3. My uncle moved to America when he was 15. 13. By the time he was 15, he'd forgotten how to say his own name. The Caribbean is made of nearly 30 countries. But you only take the time to learn about one ingredient in this melting pot. It is no wonder my uncle cannot say he is Bajan without the spices slicing holes in his taste buds, too. You do not want to understand me, only to make museums out of the mausoleums in my mouth, my teeth, my tongue, my culture. You like to put the things you consider broken on display for your amusement, but every exhibit you have is at the expense of my culture. One. My navel string berry everywhere, which is to say that anywhere I am brave enough to open my mouth and speak the same way as the people I come from do, regardless of whatever experience it is you think you are entitled to. One, I am home. Thank you.
Thank you so much. You may have given me some inspiration there. I'll go write something else. All right, so we're gonna change gears. Our second guest is from New York. And Jillian, you're gonna forgive me. I think the first time that I actually visited New York was probably about 5 years ago. It took me that long. I have not been to Buffalo, but I do want to visit. Born and raised on the east side of Buffalo, New York, Jillian Hanesworth began writing at the age of 7. In 2017, Hanesworth committed herself to playing a major role in social change through art. This commitment gave life to her poetry career. A passionate spoken word artist, she seeks to empower listeners to take part in demanding and creating sustainable systemic change. Hanesworth is the founder of Literary Freedom LLC. She's a community activist and organizer, and the first ever poet laureate in the history of Buffalo. It is our pleasure to welcome Jillian Hanesworth to Words Across the Water.
Thank you for that introduction. I am so happy to be here. So I'm just gonna jump right into it. So I'm from Buffalo. I grew up on the east side. To give you just a little bit of information about Buffalo, because not a lot of people know a lot about this city. So it's not a big city, it's considered a medium-sized city, whatever. It is one of the most segregated cities in the country. It has one of the highest poverty rates in the country. It has the highest homicide rate in the state. I grew up on the east side, which is what we used to call growing up like the Black side of the city. 85% of the Black population of Buffalo, which Black people make up 58% of the city. 85% of the Black population reside on the east side. On May 14th, a white supremacist, white nationalist came into our community. They came into an area of the city. The zip code is 14208. It has the highest population of Black people outside of New York City in 14208, and massacred a grocery store. This is the only grocery store in a Black community in the city of Buffalo. A lot of Buffalo deals with food insecurity. So that situation really put a spotlight on our city, on the way we would respond to that situation. And I'm really blessed to have been able to be a voice for my community. So the first piece I'm going to do is actually a poem called Water, which is fitting for today. This poem, the families of the victims came to me and asked me to write this piece, as well as Tops Grocery Store. And this poem sits in Tops as a memorial, as a tribute to the lives that were taken. This poem is called Water. Let the hopeful healing waters flow, ushering in a rebirth of our sense of self. Let the waters remind us of time, current yet fleeting like life itself, large yet within reach, just as the ancestors. Let the hopeful, healing waters flow, cleansing all pain and fear, all hurt and regret. Let the water heal our people, reminding us that even our small marks on this huge world are necessary. Let the hopeful, healing waters flow. Let the water tell the stories of those that came before us, those who fought and believed for us, those with the strength and power of a high tide, those with the meekness of a still pond. Let the beauty of the unknown offer comfort and hope, for within water, there will always be life. So that's water. I'm very, very privileged to have been able to write that piece. It was probably one of the hardest pieces I've written, and it's so simple. But I never thought I'd have to use my art that way. So I'm grateful to my community. So I started writing poetry when I was about 9. I started by writing songs and raps. I thought I was going to be like Beyonce or Missy Elliott. And I'm very much so influenced by music. I grew up in a musical family. We had a studio in our basement growing up. I went to an arts high school in Buffalo, got into college for singing. And then I decided to lean more into politics and social sciences. So got away from singing, but I try to hold true to my musical roots through my poetry. I do a lot of freestyle poetry inspired by hip hop. So this piece that I'm going to do is the piece that kind of got me started in this work. It's called Little Black Boy, and I wrote it after Officer Darren Wilson, who brutally murdered Michael Brown, was not indicted for any crimes. So this is Little Black Boy. I wish the little black boy did something wrong. I wish the police yelled freeze, and the little black boy came barreling at him, aiming a gun at ease, actually life-threatening. So when the cops have to fight and the bullets take flight, no one has to hide and no one has to lie because the little black boy did something wrong this time. I wish the video of the incident leaked on Facebook and the whole world tuned in to get a closer look, and we could all collectively say, yeah, that sucks, but he had it coming all along because this time the little black boy did something wrong. I wish I could watch it on TV with my nephews and say, you see what he just did? That's something you should never do, because it's easier to explain why he's laying dead in the street, bullet wounds still steaming from the lead and the heat, than to say no justice, no peace, or RIP, because the little black boy did nothing wrong. And it's easier to explain what's wrong and what's right, what's black and what's white, than the in-between where gray lies. And it's easier to mourn the loss of someone, a mother burying her son, when you can look at her and say, I am so sorry, mama. But this time, your little black boy was wrong. Black Lives Matter is not a badge of honor. It's not a hate group, it's a message to our youth. It's a reminder saying you mean something in a world where if you go 10 miles over the speed limit, they might try to kill you. And I am so sick of saying, put the guns down, little black boys. The right to bear arms doesn't apply to you. And if your jeans are too baggy, or your voice is too loud, or you know your rights, or you live on the good side of town, or you live in the hood, or your job is too good, or your car is too nice, or your skin ain't light, or your money's too long, or your personality's too strong, be careful out there because you might be gone, even if you're a little black boy who did nothing wrong. And in case you haven't noticed, we're still singing that same song. See, we've always been chosen when it was time for the killing, the way you choose a tomato that's ripe for the picking. I thought targets were red. When did they become black? I thought the abuse of power was dead. When did it come back? And maybe it never left, but when did it get this bad? When did the allure of equality make us wave the white flag? We've always protested the killings. We marched when Dr. King had a dream. He preached a message of freedom and we believed everything. We looked to the hills with hope of free and better days, but we didn't notice that we were still targets, just targets in different ways. They didn't kill us as much, but we were still their slaves. And they used systematic oppression instead of whips and chains. They compared us to each other like some were better, not the same. Like we weren't all stuffed onto the same boats, like we didn't get here the same way. They locked us in cells and they threw the keys away. They left us broken in the hood. They didn't even need a grave. They sent us to the schools that were falling apart. When we finally found our leaders, they stabbed us in the heart. They sicked their dogs on us. and hung us from trees. They made it very clear that we were never really free. You see, we drank from different fountains. Success with different tools. We used the back door. We followed different rules. We were taught that we were different, and that different ain't right. That's why to this day, speaking proper is speaking white. But as our standards rose, their fears grew. They were stunned when we sat at that counter singing "We Shall Not Be Moved," and they were afraid when Rosa Parks sat at the front of the bus. And when a white man wanted her seat, she refused to get up. They panicked when Malcolm X gathered a group of his brothers to police the police and make life safer for each other. And when Angela Davis proclaimed, "We ain't scared no more," we gave the ones who wanted us scared a new goal to reach for. They realized they couldn't kill our spirits. They couldn't kill our souls, they couldn't kill our minds, and they couldn't kill our hope. So they targeted our Black boys who did nothing wrong, and they killed them for wearing hoodies and playing with toy guns. They choked them for selling Lucy's, ignored the "I can't breathe," and they didn't get in trouble. They seem to walk away scot-free, but we can't let them get away with anything. So while they target us as individuals, we have to build our team. We have to show our youth that they are worth something and teach them to aspire for more than a pair of Jordans and some bling. When you know better, you do better. So allow me to preach. There is nothing we can't do. There is no goal beyond our reach. We are culture creators. They want to be like us. Match our style, match our swag, and it's still not dope enough. They will try to keep us down and they will continue to be mad. So let us be great. Ignore the hate. As a matter of fact, they should target that. Thank you. So that's Little Black Boy. So the first time I did that piece was at the University of Buffalo's Black History Month program on February 1st of 2017. And before I left that day, I kind of stumbled into becoming a poet, honestly, because I just went to do that poem. But before I left that day, I had 3 other bookings and people were like, "Can you do a couple poems?" And I'm like, "Oh yeah, definitely." And I didn't even have more than 1 poem written. So that's how it happened. And it started with that poem. So the next poem I'm gonna do is called "The Revolution Will Rhyme." That is the name of my second poetry book. It came out November 5th of last year. It features remarks from Dr. Cornel West. In 2020, I was awarded the Activist of the Year, and I got to meet Cornel West, and he allowed me to transcribe our conversation. Of course, this poem is a tribute to Gil Scott-Heron. "The Revolution Will Not Be Televised" is my absolute favorite piece. So I wanted to write it and kind of make it relevant to our culture today. So this is "The Revolution Will Rhyme." The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will not be streamed live on Facebook, Twitter, or IGTV. You will not be able to start it over if you missed a part, and you won't need to tap it twice to see its heart. The revolution will not be brought to you by Nike, the NFL, or Jay-Z. We will watch it succeed in HD without taking a knee. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live. The revolution will thrive, and the revolution will rhyme. The revolution will be led by Black women who are just tired enough to do it ourselves. It will be rhythmic enough to follow the beat, using drums and tambourines, focusing on the 2 and the 4 beats like a secret language that comes naturally. It will be louder when it's calling for the people's attention, and quieter when it needs the people to listen. People listen. The revolution will be direct and unwavering without concern of being looked at as angry. It will be as big and natural as a Black Panther's afro without worrying about opportunity. It will be as interwoven as locks, but there will be nothing dreadful about it. And when light shines on the revolution, it will create a halo around it. The revolution will rhyme. It will be syncopated, it will harmonize, it will be call and repeat. The revolution will rhyme. The revolution will leave no man behind. It will not be developed just to be displaced. Its purpose will not be extracted and repurposed or refocused, and the burden of education and comfort will not be placed on the oppressed, while tolerance is gifted to the oppressors. You will not be able to binge watch the revolution. rewinding the comfortable triumphs and fast forwarding through the hurt. You will not be able to DVR the revolution or avoid spoiler alerts or save it for a day that you choose to see its worth. You will not be able to mute the revolution, for it will be loud, and you will not be able to shame the revolution, for it will be proud. The revolution will rhyme. It will hold your attention and retain your momentum. It will float like a butterfly and sting like a bee. It will hit even harder than Muhammad Ali. It will stand on the shoulders of those who died on their knees, screaming, "You can take me from my freedom, but you can't take my freedom from me." The revolution will hold this city, this state, this country accountable, forcing them to keep their promises. Promises that guarantee life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It will be a sight to behold. It will be so cinematic that Ava DuVernay will create a documentary about it. A complete overhaul, not just a quick fix. The revolution will rhyme. It may not always be politically correct, and it will not be required to forgive and forget. The revolution will remember all those who crossed its path. With a message fierce enough to make the opposition fear its wrath, it will march through the valley of the shadow of death without regret of its path, and it is coming for what it is owed and refuses to settle for half. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution will be live. The revolution will thrive, and the revolution will rhyme. Thank you. So that's my mom's favorite piece. The Revolution Will Rhyme is her favorite poem, but her second favorite is a poem called Who's the Boss? And I really like doing this poem because I feel like I always find myself in spaces with other women who are absolutely phenomenal. And I mean, I think about the poems that we just heard from Cyndi and the accomplishments of Hanna, and we're gonna hear your poetry too. It's like I'm always around women who are just it, you know? So I wrote this poem called Who's the Boss? And I'm gonna do this one. It's a little bit more fun to do, and it's dedicated to all the ladies on here, people who identify, because we are the ones that run this. We're the boss. So this is Who's the Boss. You thought you made the sunrise. You thought you were the one. I had to bring you down a size. So I became the sun. Beamed on you heavy, had you sweating like a loaded gun. Reminder, I don't get told what to do by anyone. Don't need a savior, never been a damsel in distress. I am the dragon, I spit fire, only ashes left. I'm not a princess in a tower waiting, passing time. I am the monster you must slay before you take what's mine. I walk with pride because I have powers I have yet to learn. Not thought of as the head, but I can influence the head to turn. Shielded with discernment that allows me to connect the dots. And too humble to broadcast that I am she who calls the shots. I listen with my soul, so I hear words that have not been spoken. Vision so clear that I see through doors that have not been opened or open yet. I walk by faith, believing what I cannot see. With melanin of magic, life wreaks havoc, yet my soul is free. I push the culture forward, raising generations like my child. And candy cocoa butter is what you think of when you see me smile. I carry the political weight. Never too much on my plate. Can't starve on mediocrity. Too busy getting full on great and greatness. That seeps out my pores. I always win. No need for scores. Methodic and intentional. If you need help, just ask the girls. See, ladies, we more than run the world. We're the axis on which it turns. We're the moon that makes the waters rise. We're the sun that causes land to burn. We hold down every fort, even the ones we did not build. We reach deep down inside ourselves, finding love so pure and real, a love that makes all sorrows heal and replaces them with triumph. And we conquer every jungle with more reverence than a lion. See, each great man in history had a woman right beside him, orchestrating social change, no need to get behind him. And if she did, her back was to his, so nobody could slide him, and we never miss a beat. Don't need the blueprints when you write them. We speak up for everyone, even those who won't speak up for us. And we fight, throwing left and right until they've had enough. We can't be broken. Some don't get that, and they keep on trying us. Not realizing every blow just makes us that much tough. We edify each other like only women can, and we're quick to get to work. We're not afraid of dirty hands. We are everything, and no, we don't always see. But a lion doesn't need a mirror to just know how to be. It is ingrained in us, the missing link God took time to create. And we'll never face a challenge that we can't annihilate. See, in society, we may be the ones they like to cross, but we'll handle that like everything else. So tell me, who's the boss? Back to the boss. I don't know how I'm doing on time. Am I good or?
You're good.
Okay. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna read a piece. This piece is called Another Black Man. And there's a man in my community, his name is Willie Henley. And he hangs out downtown, like by the trains. He's really cool, really chill. And he suffers with some mental health issues. And over the summer of 2020, Willie Henley was walking down the street. He was talking to himself pretty loud. And someone called the police on him. The police came and really, really triggered and escalated him. And he started to run away from them. And the police were chasing him. He had a bat. He always has a bat because he's homeless. And the police they chased him, they closed in on him. He panicked and started swinging his bat around and they shot him. And there are so many nameless people, nameless faces, Black faces, people that are victims of the system who we never do mass protests for. You know, we don't hashtag everybody's name. So this poem was for people like Willie Henley, who we don't make a spectacle out of. And it seems like their story just kind of falls on deaf ears, but they are important and their stories deserve to be told. This is Another Black Man. Another Black man was buried today. A Black man that didn't make the news, that we didn't flood the streets for, calling for accountability and change, a pain not remedied live on CNN, not debated on Fox, not politicized on Instagram or memed on Black Twitter. He's simply gone. Killed long before his body was laid to rest, he traveled through life constantly healing wounds that the world never tried to protect him from, wondering if he was ever enough, hoping to be loved without condition, praying to be released from a mold that he will never fit into, bandages over stab wounds created by eyes that turned into daggers every time he walked into a room, for he knew that looks could kill. Unwanted and untrusted, without a chance to reveal his heart or drown out darkness with his light, and now he's gone. His family mourns the death of the man that took the garbage out on Wednesday mornings. The man that could fix a pop chain on a bike with his eyes closed, hands hard and callous, reminding them of how hard he worked to provide. They cry tears that can only be understood by the ancestors and descendants of slaves. And as they mourn their loss, they celebrate his freedom. No longer will he have to hide an anger that has been justified by history, by Jim Crow and segregation. An anger that was justified when the hose was sprayed on his great-great-grandfather on a bridge in Montgomery, Alabama. A Black man was buried today, tucked and hidden away from those that seek to break him, those that aim to strip him of his pride, those that see the king in him, but would rather cut out his eyes before allowing him to see it in himself, and cut out his tongue before allowing him to speak it into himself. Another Black man buried. And like a dove centered on peace, we release him, not allowing his legacy to be summed up by a hashtag or tainted by a culture that criminalizes his very being. We only shine a light on his past, acknowledging the fact that he spent his time on earth navigating darkness with his hands on 10 and 2, constantly checking the rear view, hoping that his Blackness doesn't become his death sentence, praying that he makes it home to take the garbage out one last Wednesday. We ask the ancestors to guide him to his rightful place beside a God he was made in the image of. Don't cry. A Black man was buried today. So that is Another Black Man. And I'm gonna do one more piece and then I'll wrap it up. This piece is called Ashe. You don't have to unmute yourself, but if you can, if you're listening, just say Ashe. Ashe is a Yoruban term. It's kind of like an affirmation. We are all agreeing on this thing. We are saying amen. We all agree, Ashe. And that is the premise of this poem. At the end, you'll be able to say Ashe with me. And yeah, you don't have to unmute yourself, but if you want to, it's fine. This is Ashe. And thank you, Cyndi. She put the spelling of Ashe in the chat. So many years of knowing that we're here, loud and proud, after running into walls and deciding to tear them down, for the people and the culture sprouting up from out the ground, building community for us all, heart strong, mind sound, and minds clear. Because there's only room for liberation in here. Standing firm because God has not given us a spirit of fear, and it's confirmed royalty can find gold in their tears. And regardless of the circumstance, a builder is going to build. So we salute those who laid the foundation, creating a new home. For they knew that when 2 or 3 are gathered, no one ends up alone, and that unity really matters because the fight still goes on. And as long as we stay vigilant, the fight may last long, but the fight won't last always. We've seen signs of better days. Ancestors' pride beaming so bright, we feel the warmth fall on our face, and it travels south to our hearts, making our love grow deep. Rooted in the passion of Bobby, expanding back as far as Eve, that's what this was founded on. Something too Black and too strong, something too loud and too proud, something that will always live on. People who will march into the fire, but will still walk in peace. Who will put the pressure on until oppression finds release. People who will stand so united that there isn't room to fall. And who understands that one can't find justice if it's not available to all. So in confidence and triumph, we celebrate surviving the storm, making a commitment towards ensuring that we protect what was formed, with our faith knowing nothing of ceilings or graves, and with true freedom leading the way. So with that, repeat after me, Ashe. To the visionaries, Ashe. To the ones who led the way, Ashe. And to the ones who will sustain, Ashe. Thank you.
Ashe, thank you, thank you. So at this time, well, thank you both ladies. And at this time, if there are any questions, just post them in the chat. I'll definitely pose them to the ladies. And to get us started, Cyndi, you're there. All right, so to get us started, of course, thank you very much. This was definitely a treat. I am sure that our audience will agree. And I just want to ask, what is your muse? Do you have a muse? For the both of you, do you have a muse? Where does that constant inspiration come from? And maybe I'll divulge why I asked that question, some personal reasons, but both of you, yes, do you have a muse per se? Jillian, you want to answer first, and then Cyndi.
Yeah, so I don't know if I call this my muse, but it's more of my why. When I was in college, I found out that I'm dyslexic. I really struggle academically to the point of being kicked out and losing all of my financial aid. And after being readmitted, I had to start visiting my advisor all the time. Like every other week, I had to go see my advisor. And I wanted to drop out, so I applied for a job at Geico and filled out my withdrawal form. And I took it to my advisor, and he ripped it up. He ripped it up in my face and said, "Take your butt to class." And on the day that I graduated from college, he reminded me of that conversation and reminded me how hard life is and how hard it's going to keep getting. My college day was my eviction day. So I was like throwing my stuff into black garbage bags, trying to get out of my apartment so that my stuff didn't get thrown outside on my graduation day while I have my cap and gown on. So he reminded me that life is going to keep happening. And if I am going to become anything, I need to become somebody that's ripping up withdrawal forms. So in my community, we deal with a lot of social justice issues, mainly racial, economic. There's been no progress for Black people economically in 29 years. I'm 29 years old. So that's my muse, like that's my why. Like I have been trusted by my community to speak for and to our people, and life is happening to us. And sometimes we want to tap out, but somebody has to be there to rip up the withdrawal. So that's why I do what I do.
Understood. I like that. I think I'll use your analogy. Somebody has to be there to withdraw to rip up the withdrawal. Cyndi?
I think my answer is kind of, what is the word, conceptual. I would say time and space and all that that entails. The time that we exist in and the spaces that we occupy. And when I say the space that we occupy, I mean, like, for example, for me as Black, as Caribbean, as non-binary, as all of these different, the intersection of all of these different identities and how they interact with the space that I live in, both locally and like globally, and the just tracing the timeline of self, I suppose, in the sense of not just like beyond my 20, I'm 26, beyond my 26 years of life, even before me to my ancestry, as far back as I can feel. So I think that would be why I do what I do and what drives me. Yeah.
Okay. 29 and 26. Now y'all have me feel old, but I do have a question now from the chat from Nancy, and for you, Cyndi. It says you have a reverence for language and have chosen to be a spoken word poet. Could you talk about making that choice to use language as your weapon and light?
Sure. So I started writing poems when I was in like primary school, but I just used to like draw little flowers and write a little poem about the flower and stuff. And and when I went through a whole lot of stuff between there. And when I got to university, I did linguistics for my undergraduate degree. And I did linguistics at the University of the West Indies in Barbados. So all of my degrees are like tutelage from the Caribbean. And during the course of my linguistics degree, I realized how much of our experiences we silence by not really, by trying to speak like other people, by trying to speak other than how it's natural for us. I went through that whole unlearning of proper English versus improper English or bad English. I went through the whole, like I said, the dissonance of Barbados not having a Creole or a patois. And through the whole time, my tuition, in conjunction with the fact that there was so much stuff I was going through that I didn't know how to talk to people about, so I just spoke to notebooks. Like every time I saw a notebook, I bought a new one. And then after a while, I shared it with someone who is now a mentor of mine. His name is Adrian Green. He is one of the leaders of like spoken word in Barbados, like contemporary spoken word in Barbados. And I shared one of my poems with him, and he was like, you should share this with other people. And I guess since then, I've been using my own experiences to connect with people and to understand people better, and to understand my time, my space, and ultimately myself better.
Okay. I can definitely relate to, I spoke to notebooks. I did that for a long time. And then I have a question that was texted to me for Jillian. How exactly did you come into the space of presenting on a national stage?
Honestly, I am just in really bad spots at the wrong time. I think after my community kind of lifted me up as a voice for us, when things started happening in the community, and reporters and things would come into the city, they'd always be like, you got to talk to Jill. So I started kind of talking to a lot of international media around issues of social justice. And then every once in a while, they would say, like during the interview or the radio interview or the news interview, like, do you want to do a little piece of a poem for us? And I always say yes, because, you know, we're trying to make it. And yeah, after that, it just kind of turned into 2 opportunities to talk to a national audience, whether it's with football teams or ecological justice organizations. I've worked with the Olmsted Parks Conservancy. I've Instagram. So it's kind of, you know, whatever opportunity comes, I always ask myself first, like, all right, who is this benefiting? Like, is this something that's just going to help me, or will it help my community? Then I have to prioritize it, because I am about what I'm about. I'm about my people. So that always takes precedence. Who's asking me to come? What's the purpose? And I've just been really blessed with doors that open for me. But I've always done the work, and it's always been important to me to use my work for my community organizing. So I feel like as long as I continue to focus on the work I'm doing for my community, the opportunities will just naturally come on their own.
Okay. And then, well, stemming from that, I have a question for both of you, because, you know, the work, well, any calling can become a burden. Wouldn't you agree? You know, so I guess I want to know, how do you create that balance? How do you create that balance to go, well, first of all, are y'all constantly writing? Is this, or do you experience moments of, okay, I haven't written anything in a while, or you're just constantly writing? Either of you?
Go ahead, Joe.
I'm constantly writing. I do commission pieces a lot. So
Okay.
it seems like there's just always something that has to be written. But with the poems that I write, a lot of them, I've been like, I wake up in the middle of the night and just like scratch things into this little notebook that's under my pillow. So yeah, I'm always writing, but I feel like because life is always happening, there's never a shortage of inspiration. But yeah, it never ends. It never ever ends.
I am not always writing, but I do have that wake up in the middle of the night. My notebook is next to my bed on my dressing table. And I work on a lot of commissions, and sometimes it does get to a point where I'm like, I feel like I'm writing more commissions than I'm writing like work that I don't want to say work that I want to write, work for myself, so to speak, or like work that is organically from just an idea that I had. Let's go with that. But also I'm very intentional about when I write, and that is because the way that the spoken word community in Barbados is very small, and it's a fledgling industry, and because of that, not a lot of young poets know what opportunities are out there. So sometimes I put writing on pause to take advantage of opportunities to help my community grow. I help other young poets, like poets coming after me, not have to go through a lot of the same things I did. Like when I first started, I didn't know of a lot of femme poets, women poets in Barbados that I could go to for mentorship for the things that specifically women will experience in the arts industry. And then there weren't a lot of spaces for specifically youth poets. And so because of that, yes, I write and yes, I perform, but I also produce community open mics. I say to people sometimes that things like Women of the World Poetry Slam that I did last year, I didn't do that to win Women of the World Poetry Slam. It would have been great. I didn't. I didn't do it for like personal clout or personal gain. I did it to make a point to say Barbadian young poets and young women poets and poets who identify as women can also go and do this, because I don't think a lot of, if any, have done it before. So there are, I try to put myself in spaces that can give the rest of the community, the confidence to go after being spoken word poets if that's what they want to do. Because I did not have that when I was younger. I was like, I don't know what to do. So I'm not always writing, but I'm always working to serve my community in some way. And that's not necessarily always the entire community of Barbados, because Barbados is pretty small, but sometimes it's specifically the spoken word community, because it's a fledgling industry, and I want it to be sustainable. I want it to be something that young people know that they have the choice to do.
Thank you. And we do have Quandra raising her hand. If you had a question, you could go ahead, Quandra. Did you unmute yourself? She might be having technical difficulties. All right, while we wait for Quandra, I did want to ask about that, Cyndi. How was that experience, the poetry slam?
It was nerve-wracking, because competitive poetry is a little bit it's a little bit of a dissonance for me. I was like, I've always just created for like entertainment and edutainment, as it were. I've never done it to like pit my creativity against somebody else's. So it was kind of weird for me at first. And then also being in a space that was dominated by poets who were not like Caribbean or Barbadian. I was like, ooh, I don't know what I'm doing here. But it was a great networking experience. It was a great developmental experience. There were some things I was able to take away from it and bring back home and be like, okay, this is something I can implement to help my community grow. And it also opened an avenue that I really didn't think about before, because like I said, I never really intended to be a slam poet, even after I became a poet. That I didn't really intend to do either. But it, opened my eyes to the fact that there might be poets in Barbados who want to be slam poets. And, how can I do, or what can I do rather, to help those people develop, despite me not necessarily wanting to be a slam poet? What opportunities can I help lead them to, or help create for them? So it was an enriching experience, but like not the competition, like competing. I think I got like a rank of, I think I was 21st by the end of it, which I was like, yay, top 25. but like I said, I didn't go to win. I went there to be like, Bajan poets are here too, hey. And also to say, yo, any Bajan poet who wants to do this, it's possible. You'd probably do like great here. And that there was a space for it, because they were very, very receptive. Like I didn't feel like an imposter. It felt like when you leave home for a long time and you go back and go to church, and everybody in the church is different, but they all still treat you like family. That's kind of what it felt like. So it was a really accommodating space, and it allowed me to learn and take away some really helpful things to bring back to the community. And I was gonna do it again this year, but I was doing my master's, so yeah.
Okay. Yeah, slams can be pretty intimidating. And my thing is always, can we all just be good together? Like, it has to be a competition. But any questions from the audience?
This is Quandra. Jillian, I wanted to know, you said you asked yourself a few questions prior to, any opportunity that comes your way. So I heard those same questions previously. So I wanted to know if you got those questions from Yvonne and Lovey from the podcast, Jesus and Jollof.
No, I've never heard their podcast.
Okay.
Yeah, no, but that's cool. I guess that makes me feel good about the questions I'm asking. They must be the right questions.
Right. They wanted to know, like, is this worth my time? Would my time be wasted if I chose this opportunity? So I just wanted to know if you heard those questions from there prior to, presenting them to your situations that came about.
Yeah, and I feel like as a young Black woman, I have to be very vigilant about the way I allow people to use my face, my voice, my story. I have to be like very protective over that, especially in a culture today where, you know, our culture is constantly being whitewashed and our messages are being skewed. Even with what happened in Buffalo, a part of my role was to make sure that we, the community, kept control over the narrative, the public narrative. So for me, it really is just personal responsibility. I taught myself, I learned responsibility and accountability by working out, by like literally going to the gym. That is how I taught myself how to be disciplined and responsible and take accountability. But it's really important to me that my community never looks at me and thinks like, Jill used to be about us. Like, what happened?
Or she'll do anything.
Exactly. She'll do anything for some money or some clout. Like, that can never be the case. And I feel like as soon as that becomes the case, I've lost myself. And we lose ourselves sometimes, you know, but that's where that accountability comes in, because you got to be able to catch it and reel it back in. So yeah, I'm going to listen to what are their names again, the podcast?
The podcast is Jesus and Jollof.
Okay.
But it's Yvonne Orji, and I can't remember her last name, but her name is Lovey something.
Okay.
But Lovey did.
Well, we know
TED
Yvonne
Talk.
Orji, so I'll definitely.
Yeah, from Insecure. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you, Kwanja. Okay. Any other questions? See, everybody was snapping.
Hold on,
and
wait. I was snapping. Are you guys doing any shows anytime soon? Like maybe closing out the year, stateside, you in the US maybe, or even abroad? Any engagements?
I, as of July 6th of this year, this is my full-time work. So I have engagements probably every day, every other day. But I guess what I'm most excited about, I'll be going to Israel in February for 9 days, and I'll be working with some local activists and kind of exchanging my form of activism and organizing with theirs, and trying to figure out, you know, how we can put our minds together to tackle some of our similar but very different community issues. So I'm excited about that, and I hope they like my poetry. I gotta practice talking a little bit slower, because I feel like sometimes, like, I'm a slam poet, so sometimes I feel like slow down so people can actually hear me. But I'm gonna work on that. But I'm excited about that.
Hey, let us know if they ask you to speak American. Well, how did the Israel opportunity come about? I'm curious.
Yeah, there's an organization here called the Jewish Federation, and they do this Israel trip every year. Well, I'm saying every year, but they've only done it 3 times. The intent was to do it every year, but because of COVID, they didn't do it in 2020 or in 2021. And they handpick select individuals based on whatever the theme is for that trip. So the last theme, there's been a clergy theme, and they took religious and faith-based leaders from across all different religions and denominations. There's been a politics trip where they took elected officials. And for this trip, they decided to bring community leaders and civic leaders. So I'm the youngest person going on this trip. So I already know we're gonna have to turn down a little bit. They are not interested in doing the stuff that I want to do. We'll figure that out though. That's small. We'll figure that out. But yeah, they pay for the trip. You just go and they give you an agenda based off of what you do, and you travel around different cities in Jerusalem and meet with I'll be meeting with artists and activists.
Okay. Well, I wish you all the best with that. It sounds pretty exciting. And if there are no other questions from the audience, I just have one last question for the both of you. And you've spoken to it, but I want you to answer it directly. So, um, as a poet, what exactly do you want to be remembered for? What is your main message that that we can quickly associate with Jillian or Cyndi in years to come? Because we talked about Kamal earlier, and when we talk about the greats years from now, what is the message that we want to associate with you, Cyndi, and then we'll hear from Jillian.
Sure. I think I just want to answer Quandra's question right quick because I don't think I answered. I'm fresh off of a residency. Like I came back the end of last month. I did the Next Level Hip Hop and Cultural Diplomacy residency, which is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State. I hope I got that right. And Meridian International. So I was between DC and New York for 2 weeks. Learning how to use hip hop pedagogy to discuss and discuss social issues and work towards social change. So that's what I've been doing. And since I came back to Barbados, I've just been writing commissions. So I don't really have any shows planned for the end of the year because the residency came at me really quickly. But
how long was the residency, Cyndi?
It was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks.
Okay.
The first week was in DC and the second week was in New York, in Manhattan. Woo. Yeah, it was a whirlwind. It was a lot. But during that time I got to perform in Busboys and Poets and New York and Poets Cafe, and I've always wanted to do that. So that was really fun.
Nice.
Yeah. What do I want to be remembered for? I think when I first started, I wanted to affect change socially. That was just like the broad spectrum goal. I didn't know necessarily exactly what kind of change I was looking for or hoping to achieve. But in the last, I'd say 3 years, that purpose has become a lot more clear. And it is to affect a change specifically in the creative and cultural industries in Barbados. And I do that by performing, yes, but performing allows me the opportunity to relay a whole set of different messages that I obviously align with. But I think what my heart is set on these days is being able to create those opportunities for poets coming after me to not have it as anywhere near as difficult as I had it. Because I too am a full-time poet, so shout out to you, Jillian, because it's hard. It's hard as hell. And not to play Oppression Olympics or anything, but it's definitely considerably difficult in a society that doesn't necessarily see the value of your art form as yet, and in a community that's fledgling and small and still developing. So the legacy I want to be able to leave is that I've created a space, or myself and my colleagues have created a space for young poets coming up to be able to work full-time as poets and do what we do, because we are artivists, is what we call it, because it's not just poetry for poetry's sake, it's poetry with a message. It's poetry to affect some sort of change. So really nurturing the ideas that young people have about how to make our society and our world a better place through the spoken word. That's the legacy I really want to leave. And if I get to perform a whole bunch while I'm at it, awesome.
Thank you.
I love that. Mine is very similar. Like I just want to be known as somebody who use the arts to put power back in the hands of the people, especially in a community like mine. So in addition to performing, I run a program called Buffalo Books. I build the little library boxes, and I put them around historically excluded communities, so communities that have not seen any economic social or ecological growth or justice, simply because the powers that be will not allow them to. So I put these libraries around those communities, and I buy books from local artists, local poets. So it creates a distribution stream for writers in Buffalo, and it gives kids and adults access to literacy tools. We put guides on how to teach your kids how to read, how to help your parents learn how to read, how to help learn the English language, because unfortunately we don't live in a society that respects any language other than English. So even when it comes to parking signs, like Buffalo has a very diverse community. Half the time people don't know where they can park, because even if you speak English, you can't understand those parking signs. So imagine that not being your first language. I really just try to tackle those everyday things using poetry. And like I said earlier, I just want to be the one that didn't let us quit, because it's a lot of work and it's hard. And sometimes the community needs a message of hope. Sometimes they need healing. Sometimes you need to light a fire under them. And I just want to be able to tell the community what they need to hear at the right time, so that we don't stop trying to envision a better city for ourselves.
Thank you. Well, ladies, we really, really appreciate having you here today. We definitely enjoyed it. Make sure you go in the chat and read some comments that were left there for y'all. This was definitely a pleasure, and I definitely wish you all the best, and I'll definitely be in contact. Dr. Cassidy.
Okay, thank you, Hannah. Thank you, Cyndi. Thank you, Jillian. This evening has been so special to me. I want to thank a few other people who are here tonight. McDonald Dixon has been a fairly regular attendee, and he agreed to be our poet one of our poets later in October 27th. So thank you, and we'll look forward to seeing you then. And I saw, yes, Celia, and I'm going to have troubles with your last name, Sarhaindo. Celia Sarhaindo has agreed to be one of our poets in November. And so we have a very distinguished company here, including some of our previous poets. We have 3 generations of South Carolina State University Poets Laureates. Miss Zaria Sumter, I don't know if she's still here. She's our current Poet Laureate. Omotunde Oredepi, is he still here? Omotunde was at Words Across the Water from the beginning. From before the beginning, when we were doing a celebration of Black poetry, he was one of our first speakers. And of course, Hannah, who has recently published her first book of poetry. I think I have the link queued up. And I did tell her I would ask her at the end if she would be willing to share with us one of her poems. So Hannah, how do you feel? Charisma.
I'll share one. It's actually not in this book. It's in my second book, which is on the way, but I'll share one. It's called Unfiltered Truth. What makes a tragedy tragic? What makes a comedy comic? What's normal for me, you might find that dramatic. So just see me but don't know me, because stereotypes don't own me. Steady dropping labels, but often feeding fables or telling half the story for your laughs and ugly glory. For the record there, Sonny, see, I didn't brand you a dummy. but how you really figure you know all about me? Does skin color define personality? Because when you see me coming, you got pen and paper listing all these conclusions. Read the color of my skin, never asked a question, but this knowledge you drop in about my likes and dislikes and what I'm destined to be, claiming I'm uneducated when I worked for these degrees. And please understand, to all, education isn't free, not when the achievement gap is wider than the deep blue sea, because all schools don't embrace diversity. Check them textbooks, sugarcoating slavery, implying that African migrant workers got a visa and chose to come to this country. Colored history lost in white translations, modern day education not giving fair chances, far from embracing all races, or existence represented in little tiny traces, generalized and stereotyped as fried chicken eating and Kool-Aid drinking babies. But rest assured, the research plainly shows all kids get to like what they know, and chicken always cheaper, easiest option in the freezer, seasoned right and dropped in that grease. Mama found a way to have a feast, because who really got options attached to high dollar prices? Not the 21% of Blacks living below poverty, and of the other 79, you think they're really wealthy? Living from check to check, trying to escape financial stress. Damn right we drink Kool-Aid on a tight budget that's lit, a quarter for a pack and some water for free. Now you do the math, that's a come up, you see. Belly full and happy, but now you claiming we too loud. But I'ma call your bluff, saying we loud is an excuse to be rough. Why is your knee in my neck if I'm already in cuffs? And as loud as I am, why can't they hear me when I speak? You know how many times I said I can't breathe, had that shit on repeat, but now my heart don't beat. Yet I'm the one who's dangerous, and society should fear me, the common description, fleeing any crime scene because the suspect was Black. And you know that for a fact, even though I was jogging when I got shot in the back, and I'm an angry Black woman as far as you can see. But damn, we should be angry. We got a right to be. You know how many we lost to police brutality? Mothers out here crying because of these stats of the kids locked up, so many of them Black. 14% of the population are little Black kids, yet 32% of kids locked up look like me. 42% of those detained look like me. 52% of kids' cases sent to criminal court. Yeah, you guessed it. They look like me. And those still free, they're still endangered by false allegations, lying accusations, and wrong incarcerations, or men repping over 30% of the prison population. Now, ain't that crazy? If we only 13% of the nation, and only 6 of that 13 are them. Let me rewind and say that again. 13% of the population are we, 6% men, but 30% of the men in prison are melanin kings. Now let that sink in. We all ain't straight lace, but that's just crap. Ain't no way them some fair stats. So the cycle continues, every day a fight. And all we asking for is basic human rights, living every day expecting the worst because the suspect was Black, except for their mass shootings where the shooter was an otherwise fine young man who battled mental health troubles. And it's such a pity no one identified his struggles. Give me a break. The media painting a picture for people to grab tissues, framing these wrong accusations and actions as real troubling issues. Never for a second think we're treated the same or fairly. Okay, fairly, maybe rarely, but often we escape death only barely. One of us being suspected of a crime is reason to shoot at the drop of a dime, yet Burger King was served up for the killer a 9. Innocent people who prayed in a church, while I can't even buy Skittles and walk down the street, not to mention in my house just trying to sleep. Playing video games is a no-go too. Guilty till proven innocent. Seems more like the truth. Kinda hard not to burn the city with the double standard rules making life shitty. And you're hearing my accent wondering why I care. So let me pause to address that right here. If you're Black, you're Black, and that's just a fact. This ship dropped my folk a few miles back out in the Caribbean. On the way here seems far away, but it's really, really near. I'm spitting in my lane and my arguments are fair. So yeah, we fighting for basic human rights every day and every night. And if you're Black anywhere, it's still your fight, because racism's still trending. Go check social media. It's blatant and deadly. No lies do I feed you. Ain't that a harsh reality? One we face while people sit back and dump us in categories, stereotyping what it means to be Black. But while you do that, just know we ain't leaving. You brought us, we staying. This fight ain't stopping. We marching, we planning. We out here protesting, rightfully demanding a peaceful existence. No white sheets and torches, just t-shirts and posters, educating our voters. And if you're with it, that's cool. Go ahead and come through. You might realize you like fried chicken too. Bring the watermelon, because you know what? Some of y'all like that more than we do.
Snaps.
Thank you.
Well, I was prepared for, but I wasn't prepared for that.
That was good. That was great. I think this panel has proven, once again, if anybody needed it, proved that educated, eloquent Black women are one of the most powerful forces this country has, this country, this world. And Hannah's in a position where, as an assistant principal, she's going to be dealing with this every day for the rest of her, I was going to say the rest of your life, but the rest of your professional life. You'll be dealing with it every day for the rest of your life, I'm afraid, regardless, but professionally. Okay, at this point, I'm going to shut off the recording, but I want to encourage people to stay, to unmute yourself and to talk. But I'm stopping the recording.